She flinched, expecting pain. What the human did changed the galaxy. The sky over Kareth IV was a dull, metallic gray, like the planet itself had forgotten the warmth of the sun. The air was thick with dust, and the faint hum of machinery that never stopped. Lena Vey walked carefully across the mining compound, her boots kicking up small clouds of grit. She hugged her coat tighter around her shoulders, feeling the cold bite of the wind that carried the metallic scent of the planet's deep mines. She had worked here for years, and every day the same thought weighed on her. Humans were dangerous. They were strong, unpredictable, and nobody truly knew their limits. Today, she had to meet one. Her instructions had been clear. A human envoy had arrived from Earth, a representative of the species the Erethian Council both feared and admired in secret. He was supposed to be here to observe, learn, and perhaps negotiate. Lena's role was simple: greet him, show him the basics, and make sure he survived the first hour without causing trouble. She had been told repeatedly that humans were clever, but clever often meant violent in Erethian terms. She had flinched more times than she cared to admit whenever she thought of their arrival. The docking bay was enormous, shaped like a giant crescent with cables and cranes stretching across the ceiling. The metal floor vibrated under her boots as the transport ship settled into place. Smoke hissed from its vents, and the hum of its engines slowly faded. Lena felt her heart quicken. She was not supposed to show fear, but the tension was impossible to hide. She glanced around at the other Carathian workers. Most kept their eyes averted, whispers running through their ranks like a quiet storm. Everyone seemed to feel it, the unknown, the human, and the danger that came with it. A hatch opened with a hiss, and a figure stepped out. Lena immediately flinched, her hand brushing against the side of her coat as if to protect herself. But the figure did not move aggressively, did not raise a weapon, did not glare. He was tall, human tall, with a posture that was neither arrogant nor submissive. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, and his eyes scanned the room with a calm curiosity. He moved slowly, deliberately, and then he did something unexpected. He extended a hand. Lena froze. Her mind raced. She had been told humans might attack first, or deceive, or intimidate. But this was simple. A gesture of peace. The simplicity of it caught her completely off guard. The human smiled, a gentle, assuming smile that somehow carried a confidence without cruelty. "I'm Ethan Cross," without his voice smooth and clear, without any trace of threat. "I'm here to learn, not to harm." Lena's mouth went dry. She hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in his. It was firm, but not crushing, and for a moment, the entire docking bay seemed to hold its breath. The other aliens watching shifted uneasily. Many had never seen a human interact without aggression. The subtle courage of approaching without dominance confused them. Lena realized she was holding her breath as well, though she did not understand why. "Dr. Lena Vey," she managed to say, her voice quieter than she intended. "Welcome to Kareth IV," Ethan nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate your help." He looked around at the bustling compound. "It's different from Earth, interesting but different." The human's calm demeanor was disarming. Lena found herself walking alongside him as they moved toward the administrative area. She expected the other humans she had heard about to act as soldiers or enforcers. But Ethan walked slowly, observing everything with careful attention. He paused to notice the way the miners handled their equipment, the way the machines groaned under stress, even the faint scratches and dents in the metal walls. He asked questions, not commands. "What does this machine do?" he asked, pointing at a complex device used for our refinement. "It separates the minerals," Lena replied automatically. "It's very precise, but dangerous if handled improperly," Ethan nodded. "I see. May I watch someone operate it?" Lena blinked. "Of course." She led him to the operator, a gruff Carathian named Mork. Mork scowled at the human, muttering under his breath, but Ethan simply watched quietly. He did not interfere, did not mock, and did not issue orders. Lena felt an unexpected relief. For the first time in her career on Kareth IV, a human behaved exactly as a teacher or colleague might. And yet she knew it was more than that. Humans did not follow the same rules as Erethians, and that difference made them unpredictable. As the day continued, Lena noticed subtle differences in Ethan's approach. He smiled at a miner whose hand had been scraped, offering a word of encouragement. He helped repair a small malfunction in the machinery without insisting anyone stop their work. When an alien accidentally dropped a tool, he bent to help retrieve it rather than reprimand them. Lena realized something profound. Humans could inspire trust without forcing it. They could lead without threatening. She began to relax, her flinches less frequent, her steps steadier. But Lena knew this calm was fragile. The Earthians who watched from a distance were suspicious. A few whispered to each other, pointing out that humans' way of acting was dangerous, not in the sense of violence, but in the sense of changing the way aliens thought about power. During a short break, Lena and Ethan stepped onto a small observation platform overlooking the sprawling mining operation. Dust swirled around the machines, and the sun struggled to penetrate the thick clouds overhead. "Do you always work like this?" Lena asked. Ethan shrugged. "I try to. Violence doesn't solve most problems. Sometimes helping people see solutions themselves is more effective than giving them orders." Lena felt a chill run down her spine. That kind of thinking. It could change everything. Humans had a way of undermining fear, of rewriting expectations. And she was only now beginning to understand it. Suddenly, a small explosion echoed from the far end of the compound. A conveyor belt had caught fire, sending smoke and sparks into the air. Workers panicked, and Mork shouted orders. Lena froze, expecting Ethan to act aggressively, to take control or issue harsh commands, but he didn't. Instead, he assessed the situation calmly. He pointed to a nearby emergency pump. "Activate that, and clear the path. We need to move people to safety first." The instructions were simple, precise, and delivered without condescension. Workers followed without fear, surprised by the humans' clarity and composure. Lena moved beside Ethan, helping direct traffic. She realized the panic was subsiding faster than it would have with an Erythian officer in charge. His calmness was contagious. By the time the fire was extinguished, the compound had returned to a semblance of normalcy. Lena noticed the subtle looks from other aliens, curious, wary, impressed. She wondered if they were beginning to see what she had seen. Humans were dangerous in a completely different way. Later, as the shift ended, Lena walked with Ethan toward the docking bay. Dust clung to their coats, and the hum of machinery faded behind them. She had expected the day to be stressful, maybe even frightening. Instead, it had been enlightening. She still flinched sometimes, but the fear was mixed now with fascination. Ethan glanced at her and smiled. "You did well today. You kept things calm and helped me understand the process here." Lena blinked. I didn't know humans could be like this. I expected." She hesitated, searching for words. "Danger? Violence? Control?" Ethan shook his head. "Not all of us are the same. I believe in solving problems, not creating them. Sometimes that takes courage. Sometimes it takes patience. But rarely does it take fear." Lena felt something stir in her chest, a mixture of admiration and disbelief. She realized she had underestimated humans entirely. They were not predictable, and that unpredictability was not chaos. It was a kind of strength she had never encountered before. As the night fell over Kareth 4, Lena watched the stars through the smoggy sky. Somewhere out there, in the vastness of space, humanity had reached across the galaxy with curiosity and courage. She wondered how many planets, how many species, could be changed if humans acted the same way everywhere. She shivered not from the cold, but from the thought. She flinched, as she always had when facing humans, expecting pain, confrontation, or deceit. But today, the human had offered something else entirely. Trust. And that trust, Lena realized, could change everything. The next morning, sky over Kareth 4 was even duller than the day before, a thick gray haze pressing down on the mining compound. Lena Vey walked alongside Ethan Cross as they made their way to the restricted laboratory, a building that gleamed in contrast to the dusty, battered surroundings. She had been nervous about the meeting, wondering if today's encounter would finally prove that humans were dangerous in ways she could not anticipate. But Ethan's calm presence made her hesitate to think in fear. The lab was massive. It was filled with machinery that Lena barely understood herself. Panels of blinking lights and tubes snaked across the ceiling, and strange devices hummed with power she had only read about in manuals. The aliens who worked here moved with careful precision, eyes darting to her and Ethan as they entered. Whispers followed them, a human among us. Will it obey our rules? Can one human change everything? Lena could feel the tension in the air, like a physical weight. Ethan stepped forward slowly, scanning the room. He didn't touch anything without permission, didn't rush anyone. He simply watched, asking thoughtful questions. "What does this machine do?" he asked, pointing at a large cylindrical device. "It separates the minerals from the ore," Lena explained. "It's precise, but delicate. A single mistake could destroy the batch or worse, injure the operator." Ethan nodded. "May I watch someone operate it?" Lena hesitated, then gestured to a worker nearby. "Go ahead. Observe, but don't interfere." The worker, a tall, thin Carathian named Mork, frowned. "Observe. Humans don't just watch, they intervene." Ethan smiled calmly. "I'm here to understand, not to control." Mork scowled, but reluctantly allowed Ethan to stand nearby. As the machine began its work, Lena noticed something unusual. Ethan's eyes were sharp, focused on the tiniest details, the way a lever moved, the way a conveyor shifted under the weight of the ore, the rhythm of the machine. He didn't just watch. He noticed patterns, small imperfections, opportunities for improvement. When a minor malfunction occurred, a tube rattling, Ethan stepped closer. But he didn't command. He simply pointed out the problem and suggested a solution. "If this tube is secured here, the flow will remain steady," he said. Then he demonstrated carefully, never taking control from Mork. Lena's eyes widened. No human she had ever read about acted like this. They always demanded authority, often used intimidation to achieve results. But Ethan's approach was different. He guided, he showed, and he inspired confidence instead of fear. The other workers noticed too. Their initial distrust softened, their movements becoming more confident as they realized the human was not a threat. Even Mork looked surprised, his frown slowly giving way to cautious respect. Lena felt a mix of relief and disbelief. Humans were dangerous in a completely different way, not through force, but through ideas and integrity. As the day went on, Lena observed Ethan in different parts of the lab. He corrected small errors, encouraged precision, and asked curious questions about processes Lena had taken for granted. He didn't just improve efficiency, he made the workers feel like their knowledge mattered. For the first time, Lena saw a shift in morale. The alien workers began to cooperate in ways she had never seen before, and even small arguments among them disappeared when Ethan offered simple, logical solutions. During lunch, Lena and Ethan stepped outside, away from the noise of the machines. Dust swirled in the air, glinting in the dim sunlight. Lena felt compelled to speak, to understand more about the human who had so quickly begun to unsettle her expectations. "Do humans always act like this?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "No, but I believe people work best when they feel respected. Fear and force are easy tools, but they often create bigger problems later. I try to solve problems in ways that don't create new ones." Lena thought about that. Respect over fear. Collaboration over domination. The idea was foreign to her species, and yet she saw its effect with her own eyes. A single human could create cooperation where conflict had always ruled. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud crash. One of the larger refining machines had malfunctioned, sparks flying into the air. Workers panicked, some stepping back, while others shouted instructions to each other. Lena braced herself for chaos, expecting Ethan to step forward and take control aggressively. But he didn't, he observed, assessed, and then spoke with calm authority. "Everyone stay calm. Clear the area around the machine. Activate the safety valves on the side. No one moves until the sparks stop. Then we check for damage." Instructions were simple, precise, and delivered without condescension. Workers obeyed instantly, their fear replaced by a strange sense of order. Lena moved alongside Ethan, helping guide workers and secure the area. Within moments, the fire was contained, and no one was hurt. The incident left an impression on everyone. Lena saw the skeptical looks on the faces of supervisors and workers alike. Some still whispered doubts about humans, but others nodded quietly, acknowledging that the humans' way of handling problems had prevented disaster. Lena realized, with a mix of pride and unease, that she was beginning to see why humans were feared not for violence, but for unpredictability and moral strength. As the day continued, Lena and Ethan walked through different sections of the lab. They observed maintenance procedures, safety checks, and data analysis. Ethan asked questions that made Lena think, questions that no Ariathian supervisor had ever asked her. Why is this method considered standard? Could it be safer if we did it differently? Have you considered this approach? Each time, Lena found herself considering alternatives she had never imagined. Humans didn't just follow rules, they challenged them gently, logically, ethically. The questions didn't threaten authority. They opened possibilities. In the afternoon, a minor dispute erupted between two workers over the allocation of resources. In the past, such arguments could escalate into days of tension, with supervisors taking sides and workers harboring grudges. Lena expected chaos, but Ethan stepped in calmly, listening to both sides without judgment. "You both have valid points," he said. "Let's find a solution that works for everyone. Can you combine your methods to improve efficiency?" The workers looked at each other, unsure. Then, slowly, they nodded, working together in a way that Lena had never seen before. Cooperation replaced conflict, and Lena felt a thrill of realization. Humans could lead without dominating. Their influence was subtle, yet transformative. By the end of the day, Lena felt exhausted but invigorated. Her mind was full of new ideas, new ways to approach problems, and a growing sense of admiration for the human who had walked into her world and quietly reshaped it. She had flinched at his arrival, expecting pain or aggression. Instead, she had witnessed a different kind of strength, one built on empathy, ingenuity, and courage. As they walked back toward the living quarters, Lena spoke quietly. "I don't know how you do it. Humans are different. I thought your species was all about force and conquest. But you—" She paused, searching for words. "You change people without hurting them." Ethan smiled, modest and calm. "We try. Force can solve some problems, but it rarely changes hearts. Influence through respect and action, that lasts longer." Lena considered his words. She had seen the change in the workers, the way fear had been replaced with focus and cooperation. She realized that humans could inspire in ways her own species never could. It was not brute strength that made them remarkable. It was their approach to problems, to people, and to the unexpected. That night, as Lena lay in her quarters, she replayed the day's events in her mind. She remembered the fire, the machine repairs, the disputes, and the small but meaningful interactions Ethan had guided. She realized something profound. Humans were not predictable, and that unpredictability was not a weakness. It was a kind of power, subtle but undeniable. She thought of the Aritian Council, of their rigid rules and reliance on fear. She thought of her colleagues, who would dismiss what they had seen as chance or fluke. But Lena knew better. One human could make a difference. One human could show an entire species a new way of thinking. Her mind returned to the day's first moments, the handshake, the calm smile, the words of reassurance. That one action, so simple and human, had shifted something in her. It had reminded her that courage could be quiet, that influence could be gentle, and that sometimes the strongest power was moral clarity. As she drifted off to sleep, Lena felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. She still flinched at the thought of humans after all. Unpredictability could be dangerous. But she also felt inspired. Perhaps one human could change not just a single lab or a single planet, but an entire way of life. And perhaps, in time, the galaxy would see what she had already begun to understand. Humans were capable of greatness, unlike anything the Arathians had ever imagined. The next morning, Lena woke to the sound of alarms echoing faintly through the corridors of the mining complex. Not emergency alarms, administrative ones, the kind that announced meetings or inspections. She knew immediately what it meant. The Arathian Council had convened to discuss the human presence on Kareth. For Lena felt a chill run down her spine. She had already seen the whispers among her colleagues, the suspicious glances from supervisors, the tense murmurs about the human influence. Now it was official. Ethan was waiting outside the lab when she arrived. He carried a small data pad, and his expression was calm, as if he had expected this moment all along. "Council meeting?" Lena asked, a hint of apprehension in her voice. "Yes," he said simply. "It seems some members are curious and others fearful. They want to decide whether humans belong here or if we are a threat." Lena nodded, trying to steady herself. She had to admit something. She feared that she would be forced to testify against Ethan. To paint him as a danger, the council needed to eliminate or control. But she also knew that she had seen his actions with her own eyes, the calm guidance, the quiet courage, the way he had inspired cooperation without intimidation. She could not lie about that. The council chamber was massive. A dome of polished metal and transparent panels that allowed the dim gray sunlight to filter in. Dozens of Earthians filled the seats, their scales glinting in the light, eyes sharp and scrutinizing. Lena felt a wave of nervousness as she stepped onto the floor designated for witnesses. Whispers filled the air. Some council members sneered at her. Others watched silently, intrigued. Ethan stood beside her, silent, composed, waiting for her to begin. Lena took a deep breath, trying to summon every ounce of courage she had. She had flinched at his first appearance on Karath 4, expecting threat and danger. But today, she had to speak not just for herself, but for the truth of what she had witnessed. She began, "I have worked alongside the human Ethan Cross for 2 days now. I have observed his actions and his interactions with our workers. I can say with certainty that he is not here to harm us, nor to disrupt our systems with force or coercion." A ripple of murmurs ran through the council. One elder, tall and imposing, spoke first. "Dr. Vey, you are aware that humans are unpredictable. One wrong move and entire facilities could be destroyed. You risk the safety of this planet by defending him." Lena lifted her head, meeting the gaze of the elder. "I understand the concern, counselor, but I have seen what humans can do. They do not rely on fear or domination. They act with intelligence, patience, and morality. Today, a machine malfunctioned, one that could have caused serious injury, but Ethan guided the workers calmly. No one was harmed. No threats were made. Cooperation replaced panic." Another counselor scoffed. "That is one incident. One small demonstration. Humans are not like us. They will act unpredictably when it suits them. You place too much faith in what you observed." Lena shook her head. "It is not about faith. It is about principles. I have observed human methods. They encourage collaboration, respect, and problem solving. These are not tricks, they are actions that inspire others to do better." The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then a younger counselor leaned forward, curiosity evident in her expression. "Explain, Dr. Vey. How does a human inspire cooperation without authority? How can influence exist without force?" Lena thought carefully. Humans act with integrity. They solve problems by showing others the way, not by commanding them. They respect knowledge and skill. They trust others to make decisions, but guide them with reason and care. It is unlike anything our species practices. It is effective. It changes the way people think without threatening them. That is their power. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some council members whispered to each other, skeptical yet clearly intrigued. Others scowled, unsettled by the suggestion that influence could exist without intimidation. Lena noticed the subtle shift. She realized her words were planting seeds, ideas that would grow whether the council liked it or not. One elder slammed a clawed hand onto the table. "This is nonsense. We have maintained order for centuries. We do not rely on morality or patience. We rely on power, structure, and fear. To suggest that humans could guide our species, it is dangerous." Ethan stepped forward, calm as ever. Lena felt her heart pound, but she knew he would not act aggressively. He simply spoke with quiet clarity. Power alone cannot change behavior sustainably. Fear creates temporary obedience, but it breeds resentment and inefficiency. Influence built on respect and collaboration encourages growth, loyalty, and innovation. That is why my actions today succeeded where intimidation would have failed. Lena felt a surge of admiration. Ethan's presence in the council chamber was unlike anything she had seen. He did not demand recognition. He did not threaten. He demonstrated logic and ethical action, and the demonstration alone unsettled the council far more than any weapon could have. The elder, who had slammed his hand, leaned back, eyes narrowed. You speak as if humans are perfect. One incident does not prove universal truth. What if your methods fail? What if chaos spreads? Ethan shook his head gently. We do not claim perfection, but principles that promote understanding, cooperation, and problem-solving will always be more sustainable than fear. Even when humans make mistakes, we learn from them and we adjust. That is how we grow stronger and others with us. Lena watched as the council debated among themselves. Some nodded thoughtfully. Others glared. The air was thick with tension, but Lena realized that she, too, had changed. She no longer feared the humans' unpredictability. Instead, she recognized the strength it represented, a courage that did not rely on violence, but on moral clarity and intelligence. The discussion turned to the potential risks of humans operating freely on Kareth. Several counselors argued that Ethan should be restricted, monitored, or even expelled. Lena felt a pang of worry. If they decided to expel him, she would lose the chance to observe and learn from what humans could offer. But she knew she could not remain silent. I asked the council to consider not what humans might do if uncontrolled, Lena said, but what they have already done. Ethan's presence has prevented accidents, improved efficiency, and inspired cooperation. He has acted without domination, without fear, and yet achieved results that we could not have expected. That is evidence of the strength humans bring. A younger counselor, hesitant but clearly impressed, raised a point. And what of their unpredictability? Could it not backfire? Lena shook her head. Unpredictability is not weakness. It is adaptability. Humans respond to situations with logic, courage, and ethical choice. They act based on principles, not on rigid rules. That is why they are effective and why they may be essential for our growth. The chamber grew silent again. Lena could feel the weight of the moment. She had flinched at Ethan's arrival, expecting pain, conflict, and danger. Instead, she had witnessed calm courage, intelligence, and moral strength. And now, she was standing before the council, speaking the truth of what she had seen. Ethan stood beside her, calm, composed, and unwavering. He did not try to dominate the discussion. He simply waited, demonstrating by presence what humans could offer. His quiet confidence spoke volumes more than any threat could have. After hours of debate, the council was divided. Some wanted to expel humans entirely, claiming they were a threat to tradition and authority. Others were intrigued, recognizing the potential for new methods of leadership, cooperation, and growth. Lena knew that the council's final decision was far from certain, but she also knew something else. Seeds had been planted, and those seeds would grow. As the meeting adjourned, Lena walked beside Ethan through the halls of the chamber. She felt exhausted but exhilarated. That was intense, she admitted. Ethan smiled softly. Yes, but you spoke truthfully and courageously. That matters more than confrontation. The council will remember integrity more than fear, Lena nodded. I hope so. I think they are beginning to see what I've seen. But some, they are stubborn. They may resist for a long time. Thon placed a hand on her shoulder. Change is always met with resistance. But every action, every choice, every demonstration of principle moves the world forward. You've helped more than you know. Later that evening, Lena returned to her quarters, replaying the events in her mind. She thought of the fire yesterday, the malfunctioning machine, the disputes, and the calm way Ethan had guided everyone through chaos. She realized that humans did not conquer, they transformed. They influenced without intimidation, inspired without force, and led without domination. She thought about the council members who had resisted her words, the ones who had refused to see the value of human action. She felt a mixture of frustration and hope. Frustration because rigid minds were slow to change, and hope because even the smallest demonstration of courage and principle could ripple outward. One human could influence an entire species if given the chance. Lena knew she had to choose carefully in the coming days. Supporting Ethan openly could make her a target among her peers, but she also understood that witnessing his methods, learning from him, and sharing that knowledge could be the beginning of something greater. Humanity's way of acting, calm, ethical. Courageous, could reshape the galaxy in ways she had never imagined. She flinched at the thought, as she always had when facing humans, expecting pain or manipulation. But now, the flinch was mixed with anticipation. Perhaps one human and the right choices could teach an entire species a new way to lead, to cooperate, and to thrive. And perhaps, Lena realized with a spark of excitement, she would be part of that change. As she lay down, staring at the dull gray sky beyond the small window of her quarters, Lena felt something shift inside her. Humans were not just strong or clever. They were a force unlike any other, capable of changing hearts, minds, and ultimately, the course of civilizations, and she had the privilege of witnessing it firsthand. The days following the council meeting were tense, yet electric with possibility. Lena Vey walked through the compound, noticing subtle changes everywhere. Workers whispered quietly among themselves, glancing at Ethan Cross with a mix of curiosity and tentative respect. Machines that had once groaned under misuse now operated with efficiency that surprised even Lena. The air seemed lighter, as if the human presence had shifted the rhythm of the entire mining facility. Ethan moved among the workers with his usual calm demeanor, observing quietly, asking questions, offering suggestions, but never forcing his authority. Lena followed him closely, noting the impact of every gesture. When a conveyor belt started to jam, Ethan didn't shout or scold. He knelt beside the machinery, explaining gently to a worker how to adjust the components. Within minutes, the problem was fixed, and the worker straightened with a sense of pride, nodding to Ethan in gratitude. Even the supervisors were beginning to notice the difference. Some scowled, unwilling to admit that a human could command respect without issuing a single threat. Others leaned closer during discussions, curious about the methods Ethan applied. Lena realized the influence of one individual could ripple faster than any official decree. The ripple extended beyond Karath. 4. Messages of Ethan's actions were carried across the neighboring systems by the Interplanetary Communication Network. Colonies under the Earthian umbrella reported similar incidents, humans encouraging cooperation, fostering innovation, and solving crises without conflict. Some aliens openly praised humans in private channels, while others worried that their authority might be undermined. It was in one of these moments of calm observation that Lena realized the scale of what was happening. A group of young Carathians approached her as she walked to the administrative sector. Dr. Vey once said, "We've noticed changes since the human arrived. Machines work better. People are helping each other more. Why?" Lena smiled, a mix of pride and wonder. Humans act differently. They don't try to force others. They guide, they teach, they show patience and courage. And that changes how people think about themselves. The young Carathians exchanged glances. Could humans teach more than just machines? Another asked. Could they change how we think about everything? Lena hesitated, considering the implications. She had felt the council's suspicion, the weight of tradition pressing on every decision. Yet here, away from the chambers of power, she saw the potential. One human, acting with integrity and intelligence, could spark a movement, shift a culture, even reshape the understanding of leadership itself. That evening, Lena met with Ethan in the observation deck overlooking the mining operations. The sun had dipped behind the clouds, casting the horizon in a dim orange glow. Smoke and dust drifted lazily above the machinery, and Lena felt a quiet awe at the scene. The workers, The supervisors. Even some council members, she began, they are starting to see things differently. Your way of acting? It's changing them. Ethan nodded, his calm expression reflective. It's not just me. Humans can act as examples, but it's the principles they embody, courage, patience, respect that influence others. That's what spreads. One action may seem small, but it can ripple outward, reaching farther than we expect. Lena thought about the ripple. The sparks of change she had already witnessed were only the beginning. If one human could inspire a shift on this one planet, what could happen if humans acted similarly across the galaxy? She felt a shiver not of fear, but of anticipation. The following days were filled with small but remarkable events. Ethan guided teams repairing damaged structures, taught safer methods for mineral extraction, and encouraged collaboration in problem-solving. In every instance, the results were better than anyone had expected. Efficiency increased, accidents decreased, and morale rose. Lena kept detailed notes, realizing that the human way of acting was not a series of lucky coincidences. It was a methodical, ethical approach that consistently produced positive outcomes. Word of these successes reached distant colonies, and soon, alien administrators began to experiment with similar methods. Some were cautious, implementing minor adjustments inspired by Ethan's actions. Others were bold, adopting human strategies wholesale. The result was undeniable. Cooperation increased, conflicts diminished, and systems that had been inefficient or dangerous became orderly and productive. Yet not everyone welcomed the change. Conservative factions within the Arethian Council grew restless, worried that humans were undermining their authority. A group of military leaders began to conspire in secret, discussing ways to limit human influence or discredit their methods. Lena was aware of the tension, knowing that any misstep could provoke a backlash that might undo the progress. But she also recognized that the human approach was resilient, its strength was moral, not physical, and that made it difficult to attack directly. One afternoon, a serious accident threatened the mining compound. A structural support began to crack, threatening to collapse a section of the facility. Panic spread quickly, and workers froze, unsure how to respond. Lena felt her pulse quicken, expecting chaos and fear to dominate. But Ethan acted with calm precision. Everyone move to the safety zones, he instructed. Secure the equipment and follow the evacuation routes. We will stabilize the structure together. His voice carried authority without threat. Workers obeyed, moving quickly but without panic. Ethan directed teams to reinforce the supports, explaining each step and assigning tasks based on skill rather than rank. Lena assisted, coordinating between teams and marveling at the human ability to organize without intimidation. Within hours, the structure was secured, and no one was harmed. The incident spread through communication networks faster than any minor news report. Across multiple systems, aliens shared accounts of how humans had managed crises without violence, without coercion, and with extraordinary efficiency. Lena watched the reactions closely. Many species were impressed. Some were inspired to try similar approaches. A few conservative leaders scowled, feeling their control challenged. But even they could not deny the results. Ethan continued to guide, not with commands, but with example. He encouraged feedback from workers and supervisors, asking questions that fostered creativity and problem-solving. He praised individuals for clever solutions and acknowledged mistakes without blame. In every interaction, he modeled the principles of humanity, patience, courage, respect, and ingenuity. Lena began to see subtle shifts in her colleagues as well. Mork, once scowling and suspicious, now offered suggestions openly, asking Ethan for guidance on improving procedures. Even the most rigid supervisors showed signs of change, questioning old habits and exploring new ways to inspire efficiency and morale. Lena realized that the ripple effect of human behavior extended beyond the immediate workplace. It was shaping a culture. Late one night, Lena found herself alone with Ethan in the quiet of the observation deck. She stared at the distant horizon, where the gray clouds met the faint shimmer of stars. "Do you realize what's happening?" she asked softly. All of this. It's bigger than just Kareth. 4. Your actions are spreading. Systems are changing. Colonies are adopting your methods. Even distant council members are reconsidering old ways. Ethan looked thoughtful. Change is always gradual, Lena. One act of integrity, one demonstration of courage can ripple far beyond its origin. Humans have a way of inspiring others without force. That is what spreads. That is what lasts. Lena nodded slowly. It's incredible. And terrifying. Some of the council's leaders are already plotting against you. They fear what they don't understand. But you don't react with force or threats. You just act the way humans act. And it works. Ethan smiled faintly. Force can always be met with resistance. Principle and courage. They endure. That is what humans offer. Even when opposed, these methods have a way of inspiring change. As the days passed, Lena observed more incidents that reinforced her realization. Aliens began working together across departments, sharing knowledge rather than guarding it jealously. Accidents and inefficiencies diminished, and morale improved steadily. The ripple of human influence continued outward, reaching distant colonies, inspiring debate, experimentation, and, in some cases, outright admiration. One afternoon, a team of engineers from a neighboring colony arrived on Kareth to study the methods Ethan had applied. They had observed reports of his interventions, and they were eager to learn. Lena guided them through the operations, explaining the principles behind the actions rather than the technical details alone. Ethan engaged with them directly, asking questions, encouraging observation, and allowing them to try solutions themselves. The visiting engineers left with a sense of excitement and purpose. They returned to their home systems with new ideas and methods, ready to implement changes in their colonies. Lena realized that the ripple effect she had witnessed on Kareth IV was now spreading exponentially, reaching places she could not even imagine. Yet, she remained aware of the underlying tension. Not all aliens embraced change. Some were plotting in secret, preparing to challenge the human influence directly. Lena knew that confrontation was inevitable, that the ripple effect of one human's actions could provoke resistance. But she also understood something essential. Humans did not rely on intimidation or force. Their strength lay in principle, courage, and integrity. And those qualities could withstand attempts to suppress them. As she stood on the observation deck one evening, watching the machinery move with quiet efficiency under the dim light. But the galaxy itself, and perhaps Lena realized with a quiet thrill, she would be there to witness it. The galactic summit was unlike anything Lena Vey had ever seen. The council chamber floated in orbit around a neutral star. A massive dome of polished metal and transparent panels that offered a breathtaking view of the swirling galaxies beyond. Delegates from dozens of species gathered, their forms varied and strange, some winged, some scaled, some shimmering with bioluminescence. Yet beneath the diversity there was a tension that stretched the room like a taut wire. Every eye was on the human, Ethan Cross, and on the Carathian scientist, who had dared to speak truthfully on his behalf. Lena's heart pounded as she walked beside Ethan. She had flinched at his first arrival on Kareth, expecting hostility, intimidation, or deceit. But now, here at the center of the galaxy's political stage, she knew that humans had already shown a different kind of strength, moral courage, ingenuity, and the ability to inspire cooperation without domination. The head of the summit, a tall, gray-scaled alien named Counselor Varric, called the chamber to order. His voice echoed through the dome. Delegates, we are here to decide the role of humanity in interstellar affairs. Some believe humans are unpredictable and dangerous. Others have observed their methods and claim they are transformative. Today, we shall hear firsthand from those who have worked with them. All eyes turned to Lena. She swallowed hard, stepping forward. The whispers and murmurs from the audience were heavy, some skeptical, some curious. Lena's palms were sweaty. But she steadied herself and began to speak. I have observed human methods for several days, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. I was assigned to greet and guide one human, Ethan Cross, on Kareth IV. At first, I expected violence or deception. I flinched at his presence, as my instincts and experience told me to. But what I witnessed was entirely different. She paused, letting the chamber absorb her words. Ethan acted without intimidation or force. He guided workers through crises, repaired dangerous equipment safely, and encouraged cooperation among teams who had never worked together effectively before. He did not demand obedience. He did not exploit fear. Yet he achieved results that none of our traditional methods could produce. He inspired confidence, efficiency, and trust. A murmur ran through the delegates. Some leaned forward, interested. Others exchanged doubtful glances. Lena continued, gathering courage from the memory of everything she had witnessed. What I am saying is simple, she continued. Humans, when they act with principle, patience, and intelligence, have the ability to change cultures without coercion. They lead by example, not by threat. They inspire growth, cooperation, and trust. One human can ripple across entire systems, reshaping communities, institutions, and even civilizations. Ethan stepped forward, his calm presence filling the chamber. I do not claim to be extraordinary, he said. I do not speak as a conqueror or a ruler. What we offer is not power through fear, but power through example. Every species faces challenges. Every leader faces crises. Humans have found that courage, integrity, and respect produce results that domination cannot. These methods are not perfect, and humans make mistakes, but the principles endure. The results endure. The chamber fell silent. Even the most skeptical delegates could not deny the weight of Ethan's words or the credibility of Lena's testimony. Some of the more conservative council members scowled, unwilling to acknowledge that their centuries-old systems of fear and hierarchy could be challenged by ethical leadership. One elder, a winged species called the Tharkin, flapped her wings angrily. You speak as if humans are flawless. One error, one misstep, and entire systems could collapse. How can we trust beings so unpredictable? Ethan shook his head gently. Humans are not flawless, but we are adaptable. We learn from mistakes. We act with reason and courage. Fear may create obedience, but it does not inspire understanding. Respect and principle endure where intimidation fails. Lena noticed subtle changes in the chamber. Some delegates nodded slowly, seeing truth in Ethan's words. Some whispered to each other, comparing notes from reports they had received from other colonies. Lena realized that the ripple she had seen on Kareth IV was now being felt here on a galactic scale. Another delegate, a crystalline being named Sirith, rose cautiously. If humans act as you describe, then the potential for positive change is immense. But how can we ensure your methods are applied consistently across different cultures? Ethan smiled. The human way is not about strict rules. It is about principles, courage, respect, and integrity. These principles are adaptable to any species. They are not dictated by culture or hierarchy. They are universal. The ripple effect comes not from force, but from demonstration, example, and choice. For the first time, Lena saw hesitation turn to consideration in some delegates. Their skepticism was giving way to curiosity, even admiration. One of the youngest counselors, a delicate being with shimmering skin, whispered to a colleague, "Perhaps they are right. Perhaps humans show us a different path." The discussion grew intense. Conservative factions tried to discredit humanity, claiming that unpredictability could spark chaos. They cited minor incidents, exaggerating mistakes, and arguing that humans could not be trusted. But Lena and Ethan responded not with aggression, but with calm demonstration and logical reasoning. They recounted events on Kareth IV, the machine malfunction, the structural support crisis, and the ways in which humans had inspired cooperation and innovation. The chamber was quiet after their testimony. Delegates turned to each other, murmuring, debating, and reconsidering. Lena felt a sense of anticipation she had never felt before. This moment, the chance to demonstrate that one species could act differently, without violence, and still change the galaxy, was historic. Finally, Counselor Varric spoke. We must vote. Humanity's role in galactic affairs shall be determined based on observed conduct, testimony, and potential for positive influence. All those in favor of granting humans advisory and cooperative privileges, raise your symbols. Lena counted dozens of raised symbols, more than she had expected. Then the opposition lifted theirs, fewer but resolute. Ethan waited calmly, his face serene, as the chamber recorded the votes. Humanity shall be granted the role of neutral advisors across the galaxy, Counselor Varick announced. Their principles and actions shall be studied and integrated where beneficial. We recognize that influence can come without domination, that courage and integrity can reshape systems, and that one human has demonstrated a method of leadership that is in its way transformative. Lena's chest swelled with pride and relief. She had flinched at Ethan's arrival, expecting danger. Instead, she had witnessed history. The galaxy itself had begun to shift. It was because one human had acted differently than anyone expected. Delegates began to congratulate each other quietly. Some still skeptical, but curious to see the outcomes. Ethan nodded to Lena. "You spoke truthfully," he said softly. "Your courage helped. You trusted your observation, not fear. That is what allowed this to happen." Lena smiled, feeling warmth spread through her. "I was afraid," she admitted. "But I also saw what you were capable of. You didn't need to force anything. You just acted, and it worked." Ethan's smile was gentle. "That is what humans do. We act with integrity and let the results speak." Courage and principle ripple farther than force ever could. Outside the summit chamber, Lena and Ethan walked along the observation deck. Stars glittered in the void, distant galaxies spinning silently in the darkness. Lena thought of Kareth, of the miners, the workers, the young Karathians she had guided, and the subtle but profound shifts that had already begun. She realized that one species, acting with principle and courage, could inspire change that spread across worlds and systems. "Do you realize what this means?" Lena asked. "Humans are now recognized across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as advisors, as examples of what leadership without force can look like. This could change everything: how leaders act, how systems operate, even how species interact." Ethan nodded. "It is only the beginning. Change is gradual, but every act of courage, every decision based on principle ripples outward. Today humanity has shown a different way. Tomorrow, others may follow, and the galaxy will be better for it." Lena took a deep breath, letting the enormity of the moment sink in. She had flinched at humans for so long, expecting conflict and danger, but now she understood that their strength was different, subtle, moral, and transformative. One human had changed the course of history not through power, but through example. One human had chosen integrity over intimidation, courage over fear, and cooperation over dominance. And that choice had changed the galaxy. As they looked out into the endless expanse of stars, Lena felt hope unlike anything she had ever experienced. The ripple of humanity's actions had begun, and she knew that other planets, other species, and future generations would feel its impact. The galaxy would never be the same. She flinched once more, almost instinctively, but this time it was not from fear. It was anticipation. Anticipation for the changes yet to come, the challenges yet to be met, and the courage yet to be shown. Humans had arrived in the galaxy, not to conquer, but to inspire. And the galaxy would remember.